country's living a historic moment. It's transitioning into this post-industrial era, an era of extraordinary opportunity. Our ideas are not allowing our nation to fulfill its potential in this new century. I believe I have the ideas for the country. I believe I have the vision for the country. I believe I'm positioned to help lead this country to this new American century. I think the 21st century is going to be better than the 20th century, but there's some things we're going to have to do to make that happen.
You said the other day that this election presents a generational choice about what kind of country we're going to be. Didn't we just do that?
Well, I think Obama campaigned on some of those themes. Unfortunately, his ideas don't help achieve it. It's not just enough to have new ideas. They have to be good ideas.
You know, you're young, you're bright, you've been in the Senate, but not for a very long time. A lot of Republicans think the last time they chose somebody with that very same profile, they didn't choose him, but it didn't work out very well. How do you convince your party you're not you-know-who?
Well, first of all, I think there's a dramatic difference from President Obama and I in our experience. I'm actually the only candidate thinking about running for president that served at the local, state, and federal level, served 9 years in the Florida legislature. I was the Speaker of the House. I'll have served a full term in the Senate. The presidency is a big job, and I'm prepared for that.
Let's talk about immigration. You're Hispanic. You have a wonderful life story. You were part of that bipartisan group that put together an immigration reform bill. You voted for it, and then when you got a lot of heat from people in your own party, you walked away from it.
Well, that's not an accurate assessment. What I'm saying to people is we can't do it in a massive piece of legislation. And I know because I tried. We understand that we have to deal with 12 million human beings that are in this country that have been here for longer than a decade. We know we have to deal with this. We are not prepared to deal with it until first you can prove to us this will never happen again.
Well, if you became president, would you sign the bill that you put together into law?
Well, that's a hypothetical that will never happen. What I would do if I was president, the first thing I would do is I would ask Congress to pass a very specific bill that puts in place E-Verify, an entry-exit tracking system to prevent visa overstays and improve security on the border. Once we achieve that, step two would be we would modernize our legal immigration system, less family-based, more merit-based. And then the third step would be to pass a bill that goes to the 10 million people that are here, 12 million that are here illegally. If they've been here for longer than a decade, they have to pass a background check, they have to learn English, they have to pay taxes, they have to pay a fine, and they would get a work permit. And after a substantial period of time in that status, assuming they haven't violated any of the conditions of that status, they would be allowed to apply for legal residency, just like anybody else would, not a special process. And after you're a legal resident, after a number of years, by law, you're allowed to apply for citizenship. It's a long process, it's a reasonable process, it's a fair process, but it has to happen in that order, and it begins with serious enforcement measures.
Your friend, your mentor, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, you say you're not running against him. But how can you not run against him?
I have a tremendous personal affection and admiration for him. And my view of it is there will be multiple people running. We're blessed as Republicans. We have a strong field of quality people that are running. And I think the Democrats are struggling to find one. And we have 8 or 9. And I think we're going to be a better party for it. I think America's going to get a better president for it.
Was that hard for you to decide, well, it looks like he's going to run too, but I'm going to
Well, it's a unique situation. You know, I don't think anyone could have envisioned it working this way, but there comes a point in time where if you have an opportunity to serve your country legitimately, a legitimate opportunity to serve your country at its highest office, especially someone like me that feels a tremendous debt to America, it's an opportunity I had to take seriously, and I did. But at the end of the day, it won't change how I feel about Governor Bush. He remained my friend and someone I admire both personally and politically.
Why would you be a better president than Hillary Clinton?
It starts with, I believe, a Clinton presidency. It would basically be another 4 years of Barack Obama. Up to this point, I've not seen her distinguish herself on a single issue from what the president is doing now. I think that's particularly true on foreign policy. We cannot ignore that she was the Secretary of State during the first 4 years of the Obama presidency and has virtually no meaningful achievement to show for it. On the contrary, whether it's the reset in Russia or our response to Benghazi or everything in between, the Obama foreign policy during the Clinton years, especially as Secretary of State, have been a disaster for America. Today, our allies trust us less, our enemies fear us less, and America has less influence in the world today than it did 4 to 6 years ago.
What is the single most important issue, the biggest challenge in this campaign and for the next president?
Well,
is it foreign policy or is it domestic policy?
On a federal perspective, it always begins with foreign policy, because the most important obligation of the federal government is to keep us safe. And today we face threats from abroad that are multifaceted in comparison to what they were 10 or 15, 20 years ago. We face the risk of a rising China. We see the erosion of NATO's ability to blunt Putin's efforts to rewrite and relitigate the end of the Cold War in Europe. And then we see the rise in the Middle East of both multiple radical jihadist groups, both ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other affiliated groups. So the world has it's a multifaceted threat.
Well, do you think we're winning?
Well, I don't think we're doing as well as we could be on any of these fronts.
Can you, Senator, envision under any circumstances sending American ground forces back into the Middle East?
Well, it's not the ideal outcome. I mean, certainly there are circumstances, hypothetically, where that would happen. It isn't the first option because it isn't the best option. The best option would be the combination of a Sunni-Arab combined army, Egyptians, Saudis, Jordanians, who confront a radical Sunni group on the ground and defeat them, in combination with U.S. air support, U.S. logistical and intelligence support, and embedded with some U.S. special operations forces. That is the best option moving forward. In the absence of that, we have what we have now, which is we have outsourced the ground operation to Shia militias under the complete control of General Soleimani and the Revolutionary Guard of Iran, and they're not leaving when this is over. If ISIS is defeated, they will then become the predominant group on the ground, and you've just triggered a whole new era of Iranian influence over Iraq, but also the increase for sectarian violence in that region for years to come.
And does that present a threat to the American homeland?
Absolutely. To begin with, I mean, Iran's hegemonic ambitions present a threat to our homeland. Iran continues to develop long-range rockets. What are they? They're not trying to put a man on the moon. The reason why they're developing intercontinental ballistic missiles is to hold it as a leverage point, initially against Europe and ultimately against the United States.
Where do you come down then on the negotiations with Iran on trying to limit their nuclear weapons?
I don't think they'll be successful. They're leaving in place massive amounts of infrastructure. Russia's going to provide anti-aircraft capabilities. The Chinese are going to build a nuclear reactor capability, all of which is the basic infrastructure you need to weaponize that system.
So if you don't get a deal, what's the alternative? Do we have to go to war? Is it necessary to be absolutely certain they don't have a nuclear weapon or the capability to build one?
And I think that the best way to have achieved that is to leave in place both the unilateral sanctions and the international sanctions. You combine that with a very clear demarcation to the Iranian regime, and that is this: if you cross this threshold, you will face military action on the part of the United States. We don't want that to happen, but the risk of a nuclear Iran is so great that that option must be on the table.
So if it came to that, that would be an option that you would actually
absolutely
consider and use.
And let me tell you why. If we don't do it, someone else will. The Saudis are not going to sit there and watch Iran build a Shia bomb without a Sunni bomb. The Israelis are not going to sit there and watch a regime that calls for their destruction develop the capability to do so. But again, we would hope to have avoided that point by severely limiting and sanctioning Iran for its nuclear ambitions. And quite frankly, I think this deal could literally lead to increasing the prospects for war.
But what you're saying here, we cannot let Iran become a nuclear
Absolutely.
power, and we have to do whatever is necessary if that includes going to war
Absolutely.
with Iran.
By the way, if Iran doesn't need nuclear power, peaceful nuclear power, they're an oil-rich country. The only reason why they want enrichment and reprocessing capability is they want to one day be able to be nuclear threshold or nuclear possessed.
Let me ask you, we're talking about things here on Earth. Let's talk about things above the Earth and the whole idea of climate change. You have said, if I'm correct, that humans are not responsible for climate change. Did you say that?
What I said is humans are not responsible for climate change in the way some of these people out there are trying to make us believe, for the following reason. I believe the climate is changing because there's never been a moment where the climate is not changing. The question is what percentage of that, or what is due to human activity? If we do the things they want us to do, cap and trade, you name it, how much will that change the pace of climate change versus how much will it cost our economy? Scientists can't tell us what impact it would have on reversing these changes, but I can tell you with certainty it would have a devastating impact on our economy.
Talk a little bit about social issues. You have said you're against gay marriage. Do you think that homosexuality is a choice?
Well, first, it's not that I'm against gay marriage. I believe the definition of the institution of marriage should be between one man and one woman. States have always regulated marriage, and if a state wants to have a different definition, you should petition the state legislature and have a political debate. I don't think courts should be making that decision, and I don't believe same-sex marriage is a constitutional right. I also don't believe that your sexual preferences are a choice for the vast and enormous majority of people. And in fact, the bottom line is that I believe that sexual preference is something that people are born with.
Senator, we thank you.